All right, let's go ahead and have you look at the last page of your packet, and it's got this title at the top about what do you call an occupied restroom on an airplane. So get your calculator ready, get your pen and pencil ready, and let's get cranking on these Pythagorean theorem problems. All right, here we go. I'm going to give us a little more room here. And here we go. All right, finding this first one, and I apologize, my copy's a little blurry here, but you have 15 for one leg and 24 for the other leg, which means you're going to add these two squares together. So you're going to take 15 squared and 24 squared. When you crank those out, okay, this gives you 225 when you square that one. And then you also get, let me get this on here. So we get 225 here, and then 24 squared is 576. So when you add those two together, you get 801. That's what c squared is equal to. You need to take the square root of 801, and that's what that hypotenuse will be equal to. Now notice in your directions, they say most answers appear are rounded and usually to the tens place. So when you use your calculator and you take the square root of 801, you get approximately 28 3/10. So what you need to do then is look down below, and this one says cross out the letters above each correct answer. So where you find 28.3 centimeters, then go ahead and cross those letters above that one out. All right, let's look at the next one. This one, look at this. You get a hypotenuse. So you have this side, let's call it A. That leg, A squared plus 27 squared, has to equal 30 squared. This one, you end up needing to subtract because this ends up giving you 900 over here. Here, with that a squared, we have 27 squared. And when you grab your calculator and calculate that thing, you get 729. So here's what happens. 729, here was 900. Subtract 729 from each side. When you do that, you're left with 171, which means that A, this missing leg up there, is equal to the square root of 171, and that should be approximately 13 1/10. Okay, and we're in feet. So go ahead and look down below for that one. I'll circle these guys for you. All right, let's check this next one. Here, notice you have 6/10 is one leg. We don't know this leg, and the hypotenuse is 8/10. So this is going to end up being a subtraction one, okay? So you have a squared. When you take 6/10 squared, you end up with 36 hundredths. When you take 8/10 squared, you end up with 64 hundredths. When you subtract these guys, okay, you've got to take 36 hundredths away from 64 hundredths, and you end up on this one with the square root of, I believe it's 28. Does that sound right? 28 hundredths? Something like that. All right, that looks right. And so take this one last step, and you get, when you round this to the tens place, you get approximately, A is 0.5 or about 1/2. And our label there is kilometers, okay? Last but not least, look at number 4 here, this guy. Something doesn't look quite right about this one. Look at that triangle for a little bit. Notice something? Yeah, guess what? that is not marked as a right triangle. Visually, it doesn't even look like a right triangle. So here's our problem. We're looking at this and saying, this one, we cannot figure out that missing side because we don't have enough information. So this is one of those that is not at all possible, okay? Not possible. All right, let's turn to the next one. Question number 5. All right, big screen TV. Haha, Mr. Potato. Get it? Couch potato. The screen is 52 inches wide and 29 inches high. This is a huge one. It's a good thing we have a calculator here because this is going to be some big computation. These are both of your legs, so this is an addition problem, all right? And when you take 29 squared, which is something like 841, and you take 52 squared, which is really big, 2,704, that is what c squared is equal to. So when you add these two together, you get 3,535, 45, sorry. I'm checking this on my calculator. Okay, that's what c squared is. So if we want to find just c, we have to take the square root of that huge number. Okay, and when you do that, we end up with a value of approximately 59.5 inches for the diagonal on that screen, which is the way they measure those screens. And I would bet they would probably advertise that by rounding it up and saying it's 60 inches. That's a big TV. All right, make sure you're going down then to the code below in the puzzle, crossing out those letters where the correct answers occur. All right, next, number 6. It says a 16-foot ladder is leaned against the wall. So just to get the right picture here, 16 is the ladder, and that's going to be the hypotenuse, because over here, this is the wall, and it's 5 feet from the wall on the bottom. So that's why I set it up this way. I'm calling this time letter B as this missing leg. So take 5 squared plus b squared, and that has to equal 16 squared, which I happen to know is 256. All right, this is a subtraction one, so you're going to end up with b squared, subtract 25 from each side, is 231. So b is the square root of 231. Take that and round that to the nearest tenth. Okie dokie. And by the way, that ends up being about 15.2 feet. There we go. All right, next. Number 7. This is a very steep slide, by the way, as I look at this picture. Well, I keep going the wrong way. Hold on. Here we go. 25-foot water slide. Extends 15 feet out into the water. How high is the top of the slide? So I would call this A. That's what we're looking for. A squared plus 15 squared, those are your two legs, has to equal 25 squared. So we end up with this. 225. 25 squared is 625. When you subtract, so you can isolate your variable here. Subtract 225 from each side. We get exactly 400, which is cool because 400 is a perfect square, which means when we take the square root, we get a whole number. And you are going to end up with A being equal to a value of 20 feet. Boom, find that one down below. All right, 2 trains left Frog City at the same time. All right, so let's say this dot here is Frog City. Now, the one train is traveling north, and on a map, usually north is going up, and the other one is traveling east, which we'll say is to the right, okay? The one that's traveling north is traveling at 70 miles per hour. And notice it says about how far apart were the trains after 3 hours. So the train going north at 70 miles an hour after 3 hours has traveled 210 miles. The other one traveling east after 3 hours at 50 miles per hour is 150 miles out this way. So now what we're really asking is, okay, how far apart are these guys? This one's a nice one, just simply adding the 2 legs squared, okay, and that gives us our hypotenuse squared. Now this one, yes, is totally huge numbers, okay, because, excuse me, this is 44,100, holy cow. Plus 150 squared is 22,500, which gives us a grand total of over 60-some thousand, I believe. Yeah, 66,600 is the total. That's what C squared is. So when we want to find C, you have to take the square root of that number. Not across the equal sign though. And when we calculate that out, we get about 258.1 miles. So you got to find an answer close to that down in the puzzle below. All right, let's take a look at this next one. Now this is an equilateral triangle, so that means this is 20. And that means the entire bottom is 20. They want us to find the height, which is this vertical here. And what that does is it splits that equilateral side directly in half. So we know that each one of these chunks is exactly 10. All right, so first of all, to find part A, the height, we have to use Pythagorean theorem. And we're going to say 10 squared plus, actually, I should probably call this h for the height. That would make sense. So we get 10 squared is 100 plus that height squared, and that equals 20 squared. All right, 20 squared is 400. So when I subtract 100, that's sitting over here, subtract that from each side, then I can isolate my height here. All right, so I subtract 100. That gives me 300 here. This 100 goes away. So h squared equals 300, which means h is the square root of 300. So my height is going to end up being 17.3 approximately. So that's part A. And we're in centimeters, okay? Once you know that, though, then you can find the area of the triangle, because for part B, they're assuming you remember how to find area of a triangle. The area is 1/2 the base times the height, which means, as we look at this, we're saying, okay, well, 1/2 times the base, oops, the entire base is 20, and then the height is 17.3. Crank that out, and you should get exactly 173. The area is always measured in square units. There you go. All right, take a look at the grid with the centimeter dot paper for each of these guys. All right, make sure you're counting the segments, not the dots. A, this is 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. This leg is 4, and you don't know that third side. So when you calculate that out and find that third side, we get, here we are, the square root, well, 2 squared and 4 squared, so that's 4 and 16. So C squared is 20, which means C should be the square root of 20, which is approximately 4.5, approximately, okay? Now, we're not done, because on each one of these, they want you to find the perimeter. So once you have this labeled that that's 4.5, then go ahead, add them up to get the perimeter, and you should get 10.5 centimeters. All right, B, this is this large triangle. Across the bottom is 6 units. This side is 8. Those are your 2 legs right there. So you add these two together, 36 and 64, and you discover that you get 100. That's what C squared is. When you go to find C, that's the square root of 100, which is exactly 10. Cool. So we have a 6, 8, 10 triangle. Add those together, and you should get approximately 24 centimeters for the perimeter. There's part B. Last but not least is C. Your 2 legs are 3 and 5. Square each one of those. You should end up with C equals the square root of 34. That has a value of approximately 5.8. Add those together, and your final perimeter on that guy should be 13.8. 13 and 8/10 centimeters. I should be making sure I label each one of these guys too. All right, let's finish it up with this last question then. Okay, here's a park. It's shaped like a rectangle. You can see that you can basically take the sidewalk and walk all the way from point A to point B. So, great Pythagorean theorem question. Take 1.6 and square it. Take 3 and square it. And you should end up with something around 11 and 56/100. That's what C squared is. To figure out what C is, we have to take the square root of this. And it should be a little bit more than 3. When you go ahead and crank this out on your calculator, you should get that C, the hypotenuse side, is around 3.4 kilometers. Now, that's not what it's asking. No, it says, how much shorter is your walk if you walk diagonally across the park rather than along 2 sides? Well, when we walk along the 2 sides, we have to add 1.6 and 3 together. That's 4.6 kilometers. When we take this shortcut, when we take the diagonal, that's 3.4. So now it says how much shorter is that? So all you need to do is subtract them to get 1 2/10 kilometer. All right, when you get down at the bottom, now you can transfer your answers down there and see what exactly you have for the answer to your puzzle.